All right, welcome everyone. Today, we are going to talk about data analytics. And I know what you're thinking, but trust me, this isn't just about spreadsheets and numbers. This is about the force that's completely reshaping your entire profession, taking it from just reporting on what happened yesterday to literally building the company of tomorrow. We're going to see how raw insight gets turned into powerful action.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why the old way of doing things, making best guesses, just doesn't cut it anymore. Then we'll jump into how analytics is creating real, measurable value across a company. We'll look at some amazing case studies from brands you definitely know, break down a simple framework for how to do it right, and then, most importantly, we'll talk about what all this means for you and your career.
Okay, let's dive right in. Every single business, I don't care if it's a corner store or a global corporation, faces the exact same problem. How do you make the right call when you don't know what's coming next? For the longest time, the only tool they had was, well, experience.
For decades, even centuries, business literally ran on gut feelings. You had leaders using their hard-won experience to try and guess how much inventory to order or what customers would want next. And honestly, the results were kind of a mixed bag. It was basically a high-stakes guessing game, and they were playing with very limited information. So that brings us to the big question, right? In today's world where we are drowning in data, is just having a gut feeling really good enough anymore? And the answer is a huge, resounding no. There is a much, much better way to do things.
And that better way is this evolution right here. See, we started with descriptive analytics, which is basically looking in the rearview mirror to see what already happened. Then we got to predictive analytics, which is like using a weather forecast to see what might be coming down the road. But the real revolution, the thing that changes everything, is prescriptive analytics. This doesn't just tell you it might rain. It's the GPS that tells you exactly which route to take to avoid the storm. It tells you what you should do. So this all sounds pretty powerful, but where does the rubber meet the road? Where does this stuff actually create value? Let's look at a few key areas of the business. Areas with massive financial implications that you are absolutely going to be dealing with every day in your careers. First up, let's talk about operations and supply chain. This is the backbone of any company that actually makes or moves stuff, and it's an area that is just begging for optimization, where even a tiny little improvement can lead to millions in savings. This right here, this is the multi-million-dollar question that keeps supply chain managers up at night. Because if you get it wrong, you're in trouble. You're either stuck with giant warehouses full of product nobody wants, which costs a fortune, or you've got empty shelves and angry customers. Both are absolute disasters for the bottom line. Well, this is where prescriptive analytics just shines. It digs into the data to predict exactly what people will want and when. I mean, think about Amazon for a second. Their system is so ridiculously good that it can actually predict what you're going to buy and start moving that product to a warehouse near you before you've even hit the buy button. It's kind of crazy, right? That's the power of prescribing an action, not just reacting to an order. Okay, next up, let's move to an area that's right in your wheelhouse as future accountants. Managing risk. The insurance industry, especially, has been completely turned on its head by this stuff. They can now sift through mountains of data to price risk more accurately and, maybe more importantly, to spot fraud. And let's talk about real-world impact. Insurance fraud costs the industry in the US something like 80 times billion dollars a year. That's just staggering. But by using analytics to find weird patterns that a human would never spot, some companies have boosted their fraud detection rates by up to 60%. That money goes directly back to the bottom line. It's huge. And finally, let's touch on one of the biggest line items on any income statement: people. Labor costs. Managing your workforce effectively is absolutely critical, and workforce analytics gives you the strategic tools to get it right. So instead of a manager just looking at a report and saying, "Whoa, overtime costs are through the roof," analytics helps you find the why. Is one specific team having a ton of unplanned absences, forcing others to work late? The data points you right to the root cause. This lets you fix the actual problem, which not only controls costs, but also helps you make sure you're paying people competitively to keep the best talent. So theory is great and all, but I'm guessing you want to see some proof. Does this stuff actually work in the real world? You bet it does. Let's look at a couple of household names that have used these exact strategies to get some pretty incredible financial results. Okay, so take Coca-Cola. They had a problem. Revenue from their vending machines was slipping. So what did they do? They used AI to figure out the perfect mix of drinks for each individual machine based on its location. And the results? They were just wild. Revenue shot up 15%, and the cost to restock the machines dropped by 18%. That is data-driven optimization in a nutshell. And here's a fantastic little example of how they did it. So a human driver might think, hey, I'm at a hospital, people are tired, let's load this thing with energy drinks. Makes sense, right? But the AI looked at the actual sales data and found out that, nope, visitors to the ER almost never buy them. So it prescribes stocking just one. It's that kind of super specific, data-backed decision that you just can't make at scale with human guesswork alone. All right, next up, Starbucks. Now, a lot of people forget this, but after the 2008 financial crisis, Starbucks was in deep, deep trouble. Their big comeback story wasn't just about brewing better coffee. It was about turning themselves into what they call a data technology company for food and beverages. I mean, just look at this timeline. The stock completely cratered in 2008. Their entire recovery was built on a massive shift to using data for literally everything. From using their Atlas mapping tool to find the perfect spot for a new store, to sending you personalized offers on your app. They were back in the black by 2010, and that data-first culture has been the engine driving their insane growth ever since. Now, these case studies are amazing, but this stuff doesn't happen by accident. It's not magic. So how does a company actually build a system that can deliver these kinds of results? As a future CFO, as a future business leader, this is the part you really need to understand. You need a framework to make sure that a massive investment in data technology actually, pays off. So a real pioneer in this space, a guy named Atanu Basu, he laid out these 5 pillars as a blueprint. Think of it like a checklist. First, you need hybrid data. Then, you need integrated prediction and prescription. The system has to not just forecast, but actually recommend what to do. A truly smart system also considers prescriptions and their side effects, so you don't accidentally create a new problem. Of course, it needs adaptive algorithms that get smarter over time. And finally, you have to have a feedback mechanism to see if your recommendations actually worked. Let's just double-click on that first pillar, hybrid data, for a second. Most companies are making decisions based on their structured data. The neat and tidy numbers in a database. But look at this chart. That's only about 10 to 20% of the information available. The other 80 to 90% is unstructured stuff. Emails, social media posts, pictures, you name it. If you're only looking at that tiny little slice, you're basically making decisions with a giant blindfold on. Okay, so we've gone through the tech, the applications, the case studies. Now let's bring this all home and talk about the single most important thing in this room. You. What on earth does all of this mean for you as you get ready to step into the world of accounting and finance? This right here is probably the most important slide of the day because your role is changing fundamentally. The accountant of the past was a historian. They were fantastic at documenting exactly what happened. But the finance professional of the future, you are an architect of value. Your job isn't just to report the numbers anymore. It's to use those numbers to tell the business what it should do next to win. Look, you are all entering this profession at an absolutely pivotal moment in its history. You have this incredible opportunity to be so much more than a record keeper. You get to be a true strategic partner. The tools are there, the data is there, it's all at your fingertips. So the only real question left is the one you see right here. How are you going to use it all to write the next chapter?